touching base on that. Okay. Most of you know when you go to any website that you have to log into, or when you log into work, or you log in here on campus, you got some type of authentication. Most of you probably authenticate to something 3 or 4 times a day, I'm guessing. And there's different types of authentication, not just username, password, as we'll find out tonight. There's also proximity. There's your physical characteristics, biometrics, authentication of who you are. And we'll go over some things as far as servers, different types of authentication servers, protocols, virtual private network functions. So authentication basically is 2 contexts that can be split up. And first is viewing authentication as it relates to accessing something. And so when you access something, you view it, you can view it only, is your computer still pooped out? You can just look off of hers.
I rebooted twice.
That's all right. We'll look at it later. You can look off her. I'm sure she'll share her monitor with you. So once you authenticate, then you're able to view something on a network or on a server. The second is to look at authentication as one of the 3 key elements of security: authentication, authorization, and accounting. So when you log in at work or you log in at any place throughout the day, even your bank, when you authenticate with your username password, then you're authorized to go into certain things in that environment, certain areas. So it might be a savings account, checking account. It might be being able to set up protocols, set up spreadsheets, use databases, whatever it is your job entails. So access control is one of the big things with authentication. Who do we want into our stuff and when? And even why do we want them in? Okay? A lot of businesses answer the 2 questions: who we want in, okay, what stuff should they get into, but the third one they generally don't ask why. It just sits out there for years. Maybe a whole department should never see something they see all the time. Or vice versa, there might be some department that's constantly needing access to something, but they're always kind of given to it in an as-needed basis versus they might need it all the time. You might work environments like that. Okay, and what that is it's kind of like a story I heard a long time ago. It has nothing to do with networking. It has to do with a person. It was a recipe. Mom made a recipe, and found a recipe. At the end of the recipe, you had to, before you bake this, it was a bread, I think it was, they had to stick in the pan. You had to cut off like 2 inches at the end after you made your dough. You had to cut off 2 inches at the end, stick it in the pan, and the reason that she found out later why you had to cut off 2 inches, because it was always too short for the pan, was they didn't have pans that large originally when they made this certain recipe. And so they literally had in the recipe to cut off 2 inches to fit in the pan. Well, it never changed over all these years, and the reason was they didn't have it, the pan wasn't long enough, basically. Same thing in IT, though. It happens all the time. Some procedure was made 20 years ago in DOS 3.1 or whatever, or 2.0 that is still in effect today, right? And it has no bearing on anything we do. In fact, everybody just still follows the procedures. We're like, why do we do that? And the new hire goes, why do you guys do that? And the IT person goes, I don't know, we just do it. We've always done it that way, right?
Question authority.
Yeah, we're not gonna rock the boat here. Okay, be thankful you got a job. The last guy that asked that question was kicked out in 2 days.
That question works forever now.
Exactly right. Yeah, he's working down the street at McDonald's. All right, you can see him flipping burgers.
He's a burger check.
Exactly.
Back in the grills.
But access is a huge topic in networking. It's a huge topic in network security. Who can see what, and who's granted access or denied access. So you got identification, which is the first part. However the credentials are presented, and we'll talk about a few ways to do it. We're all used to username and password, but there's other credentialing that you can use that we'll learn about. Authentication, verification of your credentials to ensure they're genuine, not fabricated. And then authorization, granting you access to go into whatever area you're supposed to go into. Access is a right to use specific resources, not a blanket to use everything. Otherwise, we don't need any access control if everybody can use everything all the time. AAA is the acronym for this. Authentication, authorization, accounting. So typically by having them enter a valid password before granting access, authorization gives them that access to go in. It's often defined as a process of enforcing policies, and accounting measures the resources a user consumes during a network session. And so I used to work in an area that basically every project we worked on in programming, we had to keep track of it. Well, software kept track of it, and then at the end of the day, it would bill it to that department. So if I was working on a project for Department A all day long, well, 8 hours of my salary went to Department A all day long. And they could tell, they could prove it by my activity on the network and by my connectivity to certain projects or folders or whatever while I was doing that. And within Windows, it does have a record that it keeps track of when you logged in, when you logged out. Also, and that's the basic stuff it keeps, but it also has deeper stuff that it keeps, like such things as maybe applications you've accessed, websites you've went to, that's easily found, just to name a couple things of things you do throughout your day. All these things are accounting type of things that are done within Windows by default. So again, it can be used for finding evidence of problems. Accounting can be used for billing, like I mentioned already, planning. If I spend 50 hours on a project and then that same type of project comes up a year later and the people that gave me the project say, I think this is only going to take a day. I'm like, no, it took me 50 hours last time. I'll show you the project and we can, show you why. Because, just like everything, human nature is to bid low when it comes to project time. I've learned over the years as a programmer to always pad my dates. And so if I think it might take me a week, I usually add 3 or 4 or 5 more days onto that, because always something, they think of something else, they add something else, whatever, always comes into play. Or something I thought was going to be easy was not easy. So, a whole bunch of factors go into that. There are AAA servers that basically are dedicated to performing accounting functions, authentication, authorization, and accounting, and can provide significant advantage. And basically what it is your Windows server, your Linux server, your Mac server, all has accounting pieces built into it. When all your users logged in, it can tell you how long they've been on, what websites they accessed, what programs they accessed. It's easily queried, all this information. In fact, as a developer, the application that I can create an application that can tell from any username on a network at the end of the day, I can tell what applications are running on the machine right now without really having I don't have to have any administrative rights. It's out there on the network. I can tell just from this accounting area. I can see how many applications are running, what the application names are, how much memory is on that computer, how much memory is left on that computer. These are all accounting things that the network server, specifically Active Directory, uses all the time. And so for accounting purposes, that's great too, because say you told your employees that they're not supposed to go maybe install ABC application, and you do a simple scan like I just mentioned with a piece of software. It goes out to the server and finds out that 5 of your computers on your network have this program running. abc.exe is running as a process. It literally takes milliseconds to find that out on a network. Now, if you think about it and take a step further, if hackers know this, which they do, you can also tell quickly what antivirus programs are running on every machine within seconds. If you know what program to run and what commands to run and what application to run on your local machine, you can do a quick query to find out, okay, you can maybe do a quick application that just names the top 5. What's the top? Give me a top antivirus programs that you guys use or have heard of or whatever. McAfee, Norton, anybody else? What's another? Microsoft's right. Microsoft's a popular one that's recent. And by the way, just a plug for Microsoft, which they don't pay me for this, but you know, the Microsoft security platform is actually being implemented by a lot more businesses here lately because there's been issues with Windows 7. Strangely, there's been issues with Windows 7
Really?
and antivirus programs that are not the Microsoft antivirus app that now you can download for free. I don't know if you've heard of this or not, but there's been anomalies of like, you know, a couple of them. One we use here on campus actually had issues. And what it is, it's specifically with Windows 7. And the solution a lot of IT folks are doing is just installing the Microsoft version, which is free anyway, and you don't have to purchase it. And it does a fairly good job. But it's always strange how it didn't happen until Windows 7 came out, and now we're having some weird stuff with these other antivirus softwares like McAfee, Norton, whatever. I don't know what you guys have at home, if you've had any issues or not, but I've heard of businesses having issues with blue screening and weird stuff like that with other antivirus softwares. And but you know, if you do a quick query, you can use this server to figure out what applications are running. And then you might have heard of some of these terminology with credentialing when you guys log into a server or network or whatever servers you've logged into in the past. Passwords everybody's heard of, but one-time passwords means you set up a password one time on a system and that's it. It's a one-time password and then it lets you into every other system, okay, from that one-time password. And there's a Microsoft product out there that does this. It basically, you train it for a day or however long it takes, but not that long usually. You just log into everything you normally log into and it remembers those accounts. And then in the morning when you log in once, and then when you need in these other accounts, it lets you in without logging in with your username. So if a website comes up that usually has a username password, it just lets you right into it. It remembers all of that, which does help in productivity. It also helps in you know, over the shoulder looking for passwords, people forgetting their passwords, the whole gamma. You can guess how it would help, especially if you have, you know, which a lot of people have. Like I said, 5 to 10 How many has 5 to 10 passwords a day you have to enter? Okay. Anybody have under 1 to 5? 1 to 5 a day? Okay. You know, and that's usually average. So I'd say 5 maybe average, maybe 3 to 5 maybe average for most users. And so this can help in productivity. The other one we'll actually do here in a few weeks, I believe, it's coming up, is standard biometrics, behavior biometrics, and cognitive biometrics. And biometrics deals with who you are as your person. Your eye, retina scan, voice recognition, facial recognition, fingerprint recognition, body gait. As you walk in a room, it can tell your gait, how you walk. Everybody has a certain gait to them, how they, you know, what the sound is as you walk across the floor. Those are all biometrics that areas use and businesses use. And we'll talk about that, but you know, some of you might have used biometrics maybe in the past. Probably the most popular one is going to be the fingerprint scan biometric because it's the cheapest for consumers. A lot of laptops have them built into it now. The next one that's popular is the facial recognition and then handprint recognition where you put your whole hand on a screen. That's a popular one as well. But a lot of times you will see security areas actually have 2 or 3 areas of authentication. They'll have voice maybe, hand recognition, and a PIN they have to enter in, all 3. Okay? That way, okay, maybe somebody could fake one of them or possibly 2, but generally not all 3. That would be pretty difficult to do. Not saying it couldn't be done, but you know, you have to chop off somebody's hand. Yeah, I could do that. Let's see. Right, I can get their PIN. It's easy. Okay, record their voice. Okay, you know, so the variables might be a little more difficult as you add those to it. I already mentioned on the one-time password. Basically, it's goes in and it's a standard password, typically static in nature. Most of us are used to the dynamic that changes frequently. Within the one-time password scenario, or OTP, you set up this one-time password, and then, now that doesn't mean all the accounts that are tied to that don't need to periodically need change, because they do. But what's nice about it is on a daily basis, you're not having to log into all those other accounts. Does that make sense? When you log in the morning once, it remembers all your other passwords. Another one, what it does here is a token for one-time passwords. Basically, is you can take and it'll give you a one-time password to enter into a system and to enter into a device, maybe a laptop, maybe a desktop, generally a laptop scenario. And each morning, even though you're entering in, like I said earlier, like Microsoft has this product out now, you enter in a certain password, but what it actually does when it goes across the wires is it changes that password to a unique password every day over the network. You don't see it happen. You enter in the same one every day on your computer, but as it goes to the server and back, it's actually creating a one-time password for that session, which is fairly secure. Because if it was captured in between, like in a man in the middle, it'd be very hard to crack that password because it's a one-time password. It cannot be traced back. And so in this example here, the user enters in their one-time password, goes to our authentication server. The authentication server takes that, applies an algorithm to it, kicks it back to the user's machine, and basically what it ends up with is that token there that says the algorithm 5398, which creates that one-time password for that machine. That sticks in the machine for that day. So it's like for an 8-hour session, that key is created, sticks in that machine. Even though the user enters the same password every day, they literally get a different one each day to their machine for all those sessions to be secure. So if a man in the middle or somebody was to get that one-time password, they're not going to be able to trace it back because it's a created password just for that session that has a certain algorithm attached to it. I've already mentioned all that. Let's go to standard biometrics. Okay, has anybody ever used Fingerprint Biometrics before? Anybody used that before? Okay, 3 of you? Okay, that's the one we'll be using here in the lab when we do the biometrics one. I'm trying to remember, Highlander, right down here in Mulford, the little Highlander store, they've used biometrics for clocking in, clocking out for, I'm thinking, 7 years now, which is pretty neat if you think about it, because it's a small store, and it's worked real well for them. And it's a thumbprint. They use their thumb, I believe, to clock in, clock out, take breaks, all that good stuff. But a lot of businesses are actually using this in the healthcare arena, because in healthcare, you've got patient data that is very sensitive, and when doctors or nurses walk up to a client, they want to be able to easily get in and securely get in, and this technology helps you do that easily. You put a thumbprint down or a fingerprint down on a biometric device to log them in is very popular. The other one that's very popular, we'll find out with medical, is proximity cards. So as you enter the machine's circumference of, say, 2 to 3 feet, it logs you in. As you leave that machine, it logs you out via proximity. To me, that's very secure as far as accessing data. One thing you might think of is, well, there's no physical passwords or anything entered in. So what a lot of them will do is actually now, for accessing the machine, they use maybe the thumbprint and proximity, but then as they leave that area within, like, say 2 or 3 feet, it notices they've left it and it'll log them off. So you use thumbprint and proximity to do that. Now that's fairly secure there. So it uses your unique characteristics. The reason fingerprint has not been as popular as you think is there are some people that have unreadable fingerprints. They're born with it. They're born with unreadable fingerprints.
You can also correct fingerprint.
Do I know?
You can also correct your own fingerprint.
Yeah, you can. You can damage it and affect it yourself and, cause things not to work. But because of that, that's why we've not seen it widespread as you might think in banking and, as the only way to authenticate. Because to have something as the only way, 100% of the community, 100% of the world basically has to be able to do this, whatever it is. Okay? That's why we still have PIN numbers and username and passwords and all that. Now, examples I mentioned: fingerprints, faces, hands, irises, retinas. The type of fingerprint scanners, you have static and dynamic. Disadvantages of fingerprint or of any type of biometrics is cost, and also readers not always foolproof. You can get a lot of false positives and false negatives as well on this technology. And one of the cool things they've started to do with fingerprint authentication is you maybe seen the Bond days or the Mission Impossible, where they could take a fingerprint, latex it, put it on there, fake out the authentication or whatever. Now what they actually have is these fingerprint readers actually read blood flow. It reads blood flow and pulse below the finger, to where you can't just be a latex glove or any type of fingerprint device, like a rubber finger or something like that. It actually could tell if it's, because everybody's skin has a certain layer thickness for the most part, some thicker than others on your fingerprint. But then everyone should have a pulse, and also you can see blood flow and hear pulse if you have the right equipment. And that's what they're starting to use now as well. So it's not good enough just to have the right fingerprint. Now you have to have pulse and blood flow. You got that? Uh-huh. Mm-hmm. Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's pretty cool technology, actually. And that way, it's fairly foolproof that way. Now, you might be thinking of, okay, there are times maybe I'll hurt my finger or fingers that I've used or I do use to authenticate. Does that ever? Yeah, it does. That definitely could happen. For areas that use fingerprint authentication, you might let me know how you guys do yours. Most of them actually do every finger on the right and left hand. That way, if you do hurt one of the fingers, even though this might be your dominant or this might be your dominant that you use to authenticate every day, if you hurt that finger, you have other ones to go with. Is that how you guys did on yours? You authenticated every finger, every fingerprint? On your right hand? Okay. And that's generally pretty normal. I think in the lab, I have you guys do a fingerprint for just one of your fingers, but normally it's going to be 2 to 3 or all on the one hand. You might have seen this on some laptops, the fingerprint scanner, and fairly popular on laptops now, fairly inexpensive to add a feature to that. And then behavioral biometrics is normal actions that user takes. Like, for instance, this is pretty cool, dynamic keystrokes. Attempting to recognize a user's unique typing rhythm. Keystroke dynamics use 2 unique type variables, the dwell time and the flight time. How long in between each key, and then how long you're away from the keys, all right? Can determine your biometrics of your keyboard recognition. And that one, some of us are faster than others or slower than others. I'm not that great of a typer, so I'm pretty slow. But here's it doesn't really matter how good of a typer you are or not. It uses that as a biometrics. What it generally does is, to train you on this one, it gives you a sentence to type or paragraph to type, and then that's what it uses to train you for authentication using this type of system. It's not that widespread, but some areas do use it, like in R&D and things like that. But you'll notice here a typing template, it's got username, password, unapproved area, user template, unapproved area. Basically on this one here, it's just a graph charting the biometrics of a user. And it does have a range, because there might be days you type a little different than other days, but you're not going to be totally different, like 100% 180 degree than what you normally are. You might type a little different, your gait might be a little different in between, your dwell time, your flight time might be a little bit different, but not that much. So you'll notice in this area here, in the middle is the user template area that's the gate or the flight time and dwell time that you're allowed to be in according to what they've trained you, you've trained them to be as far as who you are and the typing. So here we have a person trying to use this system, and notice the bottom person is disapproved. They're unapproved because they're not in the same area typing-wise in the dwell time and flight time as the person that actually is the one that should have access. This one actually is pretty spot on, actually. I've used this technology, and it's not many false negatives on this one, and false positives. It's fairly accurate. In fact, a little bit more accurate, I would say, than probably fingerprint. But you have to have a keyboard nearby on every, if you were to use this. So it's generally used for computer access only, to access a computer only, and that's it. Because if you think about it, you say, okay, what you're saying is with this technology I just mentioned, the keyboard technology, I can know the person's username and password, enter it in, and still not get in. Correct. That's what it's about. It's not just knowing the person's username and password, it's typing it in the way they type it in the time they type it in, and in the keys, in the order that, that they type it in, basically, in the time frame they type it in. And so most of you probably haven't heard of that type of technology, and again, it's not used not that widespread, but there's a lot of R&D areas that use it. Medical field uses it some. And this one here you've heard before, maybe voice recognition. And by the way, everything I'm talking about tonight, a lot of this stuff you can actually download programs for free to play with on your Mac or PC on all that we're talking about, the keyboard recognition, the voice recognition. The only one you'd have to buy hardware for is going to be the fingerprint recognition one, but that one is fairly inexpensive. The one I use in the lab's about $25, I think, and I've had it for like 6 years now. It's an old one actually, but it works, and I think they're about the same price, about $25, $30 to buy a fingerprint keypad. But voice recognition uses some characteristics about your voice. One is your phonetic cadence, speaking two words together in a way that one word bleeds into the next, becomes part of a user's speech pattern. Again, for this one, they have you repeat paragraphs of sentences over and over again in certain orders, certain type of words, certain pairs of words. And then they have challenge words a lot of times in these areas where they say repeat, dog, and cinnamon. Say dog and cinnamon. So it's different words each time. It's not the same words you come in and have to repeat each day. It's different word pairs each day you have to say. Computer footprint, this is when and where you normally access a system. Banking systems use this now. If you try to access your banking system, if you have this on your banking system anyway, from a different device, or even from that device from a different location. Say if you usually access from a mobile phone, and you go out of town and it prompts you and says, hey, I noticed you're in a different region, you need to answer some questions. And they give you some challenge questions that you've set up when you set up the account to determine this is you. And then they generally ask you before you go all the way through, are you going to come to this region a lot? Or is this a one-time thing, or what? If you say a lot, they will save that to where they won't prompt you again. If it's just a one-time thing, you come back next year, in 6 months, it's going to prompt you again. So with the advent of GPS, concordance on mobile devices, which all mobile devices have pretty much now, this has become fairly common for not only accessing your computer footprint, but what type of computer you're accessing it from. So if you normally access your account from a mobile device, like a mobile phone or a mobile laptop, and say you're at your friend's house and access that same web app, it'll say, nope, don't know who you are. They can lock it down, or they can say you can't get in, or, like I just mentioned, have some challenge questions for you. But there are some areas that have high security that will say, if you're not using the device we've given you, you're not getting in, okay? And so they might do that. It might be that sensitive of data that where it would not let you into that, access to that information. Cognitive biometrics is perception, thought process, understanding of the user, who you are. considered to be much easier for the user to remember because it's based on your life experiences. Okay. One example of cognitive biometrics is based on life experience that the user remembers. Another example of cognitive biometrics requires a user to identify special faces that you've selected that's in your life. Okay. It could be a baby picture, a picture of your mom, grandma, grandpa, dog, cat, whatever, a trophy you won, whatever it is you've selected when you set it up. Here's an example of a bank account. Notice on this one, it has some words that you have to type in to remember yourself later on, like what type of food do you like, meat and potatoes, Greek, Italian, vegetarian, American, assorted, Asian, barbecue, Indian. It says, answer each question that appears, select from the choices offered. So again, you can select one or more, I'm guessing, of the different types of food that you like. And you're training the system basically to understand who you are. That way later on it might ask you these questions periodically, which most bank accounts do now. And then authentication models, you've got basically single and multi-factor authentication. The one-factor authentication uses only one way to get in, username, password. Okay? Two-factor would be username, password, voice recognition, possibly. Three-factor might be username, password, or ID, maybe just a passcode, voice, and maybe, I don't know, fingerprint scan, something like that. The third-factor authentication generally you will not find unless you are in highly governmental, secure facilities. Most of you only do at most two-factor. Anybody do a two-factor authentication every day? Most of you all do one then, right? Everybody does a one type authentication. If you're ever in the military, you generally do at least a two, sometimes three, depending on what level of security you're going through. Single sign-on. I've talked about that a little bit with the one-time password one earlier. So that's basically just signing on once for multiple accounts. Windows ID is not that popular, but it's been out since '99. It was kind of the thought of having a once authenticated global cookie to use a whole bunch of Windows apps, online app type of areas, which didn't really go over too well. But it's still out there. I know Windows Live is still out there. I just don't know what it's used for much anymore. Another one was card space, which is still out there as well. And this was actually used for privacy of users, where you could have like manage different cards. Like you could have on the cards, if I remember, you could have like account information. Like you could put on there like banking, you know, Amazon, whatever, and it would store that securely. And you go to any web browser and log in. This is what the sign-in looks like for Windows Card Space. Once you log in, you're in, and you can access all the security information you've entered in that when you set it up. OpenID, this one actually is fairly popular. It's a decentralized open source login area. Apple uses this, Linux uses this. OpenID identity is only a URL backed up by a username and password. And OpenID provides a means to provide the user owns a specific URL to be used. So apple.com, itunes.apple.com, all uses OpenID. If you have an iTunes account, you use OpenID. Okay? It's tied to a specific URL. I'm trying to think of another one. Netflix does this, Amazon does this. So there are a number of services that use this. It's open source, but it's specifically designed to link to a URL. On this one, I want to mention Ldap. Ldap security server is the most popular for authentication. It's open source, again. We use Ldap here on campus. When you guys log into Eagle, when you log into online services, you're using Ldap. And it stands for Lightweight Directory Access Protocol. So you enter in your username and password. Your password's masked on the screen, hopefully. You can't see it. It sends it to an Ldap server. The Ldap server then sends it to our Windows server, which we have on campus. that logs you into network resources. The Windows Server Active Directory works with Ldap to determine you are who you say you are. Ldap also has a timeout feature built into it, so it's you, it's Ldap, and then here on campus, it's Active Directory, okay? Once you log in to whatever it is you're logging into, whether it be, I don't know, online services, Eagle, email, it's all the same username and password, okay? It did not used to be that way on campus, but it is now. One username, password for all access using Ldap to all these other entities. Okay, so Ldap Active Directory for your stuff here on campus, Ldap Eagle, which is located on the East Coast, Ldap Online Services was also located here on campus on a server. Okay, so you have three entities working with Ldap to authenticate you on a daily basis. Now, most of you don't log into online services every day, and you might not log into your RBC Eagle, your Gmail every day, but you could, and when you log in one time, you're using Ldap for all three of those entities to log in. It's an intermediate kind of middleware for accessing content. Radius Server, this was developed in '92. It's developed for high volume service control apps. Radius Server is actually used for if you are pushing out applications for users to use on your environment, you're going to use a Radius server, okay? Because it's going to be pushing content from a server to that local machine to access different programs and different protocols. And so Radius servers are made for that and made for high usage, high data usage. And access points use Radius servers a lot of times for what I just mentioned, giving information, data, applications. So here we have a laptop connected to a Radius server connected to a access point. And all you need to note on this one is once they log in with Susan and that password, it goes to the Radius server, compares it to the database, records it in the accounting database that Susan logged in at 5:25 on Tuesday, and now she's accessing with this IP address, and this is the access point she used, and she went to these websites, and as these programs running on her machine, and oh, and by the way, her antivirus is out of date. All these things can be found out by using a Radius server. Kerberos, this one actually is developed by MIT. It also works with Ldap, and all it is a wrapper for security, and it creates tickets every time a user logs in and logs those tickets, and again has a timeout feature, and it's fairly open to any network or any type of authentication, and you can plug it into Windows easily, Ldap easily, and that's what Ldap's actually uses Kerberos for security. And then terminals. Anybody worked in retail before? Retail sales. Retail sales. Okay. If you worked in retail sales before, you probably used this. It's Terminal Access Control System. Basically, it's industry standard. Basically, is you enter in username and password into a centralized server and you can get in. You have dummy machines that you work on. You have a monitor, keyboard, mouse, and a little black box about half the size of my iPad and about that thick, if that, maybe a little thicker than that, because it has to have on there Ethernet and it has to have on there ports for your mouse and keyboard. But that's it. There's no CD drives, thumb drives, hard drive. There's no memory built into it. There's just a circuit board to connect you to the server. And so when you log in, you're literally logging into this terminal. Okay, the terminal on the server, it basically, or the terminal you're in front of is just a terminal is all it is, a dummy terminal. And when you log in, the screen you see, the applications you see, the programs you see are all pushed from the terminal server. Okay? The other term you might have heard of is thin client. It's basically a thin client. You're sitting in front of a thin client where everything's dragged from the server to your screen to view it. The other term that's in this same family is called fat client, meaning it takes the entire operating system and all the programs and dumps it on that client. Okay, that's totally different, but in that case it does use the terminal's memory and hard drive space, but everything's pushed from the server to the client every time a person logs in. Okay, thin clients are the most popular because you have less data pushing across. Fat clients aren't so much that popular because you have a lot of bandwidth. You can imagine pushing all that data across all the time. On Ldap, you've got a directory built into it where you can search people by name, by category. So I can search by students, employees, faculty, using Ldap. It has a directory tree, and all it is talking about here is the directory used to access users at any time. And this directory tree can actually be plugged into multiple different types of applications. For instance, you can connect it to a database application to see at a moment's notice all the users. You can connect it to your phones, which they are connected to our phones here on campus, to where I can plug in and see all the users that are plugged into our network and that use our phone system, uses Ldap to see that. Ldap runs over TCP/IP. It fairly simple functions, and they're fairly static. And what's great about Ldap is it's open protocol. It's open source, and so it's constantly being developed, constantly being updated, and changed to be better and better. The last one I'll mention is the Extended Authentication Protocol, EAP. This basically is a governor for radius servers it's an envelope to add for weak passwords, weak security, and basically those two things, passwords, security, and protocols. It's a wrapper, so if a person has a weak password, this protocol helps secure that transmission as it goes across the network. And so basically there's constantly going on in a radius environment this EAP response and request constantly, and it is a wrapper around the username and password in between the user and the authentication server. And then I want to go to the private networks first. Has anybody ever VPN'd into a network before? Okay, cool. I didn't want to mention this. A lot of users now VPN to their clients from the road, okay? And they'll use VPN to do that. There's a lot of different clients out there. What I mean by clients is application clients, like Cisco has application clients. You load on a laptop, you have certain protocols in that client, and then you can be anywhere in the world, double click on this shortcut on your desktop and log in, and then when you log in, you're actually in an environment to where now you can get to your network drives, your email, things like that, as if you were sitting right in front of you're sitting in your network at work. And basically what it does is it uses the cloud, it uses the internet to connect to the VPN server. Once it's authenticated to the VPN server, then notice you can get to all the internal network access stuff that you normally would get to on a day in, day out basis. I mentioned in here before, I'll mention again, logmein.com as a VPN wrapper. Logmein.com is a good one. PC Anywhere is another popular one. These are software-based VPN devices. I do recommend, if you don't have anything, if you've never tried anything, at least try the logmein.com service. This one I've used for a number of years. They give you up to 5 free accounts, Mac or PC. You set it up once at home and at work, and then you can access that machine from any browser in the world. I prefer using Firefox to connect to it. Chrome seems to work pretty good. IE I don't like to use. It just poops out every time almost. A lot of stuff, but this particularly it does. So Firefox and Chrome works fine. Firefox actually I use the most. But that one definitely has a VPN wrapper around it. And basically it's doing this right here. It's when you load it on your machine at home that you install LogMeIn on basically has a software VPN that it runs on that machine all the time in the background. And when it runs it, in fact, I've got one on this one in here. I can fire up here and show you. Let's see here. Okay, here's a VPN here, or here, log me in for this machine right here, and I can see from this interface, I can see how long it's been connected, any users that have been connected. I can add users to this. And then what's great about it is, let me make sure this is, yeah, it's on. So I can show you here up my laptop from my iPad. I can actually connect to it real quick to show you. Which I use this all the time because it works great if you're needing to access any type of service you don't have on that machine that you're on. You can do it through logmein.com. And on the iPad, they have Droids that have an app as well. You just log in, and once you log in, you can see as if you were sitting in front of that machine. Let me go ahead and close that out. Do what now?
Technical support people, like, if there's something wrong with our
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Is that what they use? Yeah, that's a really good one. I love it. Let me plug it into the overhead, show you guys what it looks like on my machine on the iPad. Yeah, because the Pro version, definitely for businesses, is definitely worth it because you can get unlimited connections. Okay, I'm plugging in my iPad to where you can see that screen hopefully here. And what I see on my iPad basically is what's on my computer in here. But I could be anywhere in the world basically and connect to it this way. Thought I had the right one. Computer 2, I think it is. That's 1. That's the instructor station, I believe. Yeah. 2 should be the iPad. Let's unplug it and plug it back in, so I'm not going to do that. Did it work? Come back. Okay, so I'm actually on my instructor machine from the iPad, and I've got a virtual mouse I can use here to do stuff. And so I'm actually on the machine on my iPad, and I could be like I see, be anywhere in the world. And what's great about it is that LogMeIn will actually keep a log of what I'm doing here. And you can actually turn a feature on in LogMeIn to where it records what I'm doing. And so let me show what I'm talking about on that one, and then we'll be done. Okay, this is really cool here. I love this. LogMeIn actually has a feature in here that lets you do recording. Go to preferences here. Here it is right here. I can record as things are happening on my machine. I can record remote sessions, save it to a certain location on my computer, and then every time that I access this machine with LogMeIn, it records it to that location. It'll delete files when it exceeds this data length, and that's great because what I use this for is, say I've logged into a server to do some certain whatever changes I made, and I go back the next, it might be 2 in the morning, and you're not too alert, you know, I'm not anyway. So you get up the next morning to go to work, I can fire up this AVI file that it recorded, and I can see exactly what I did. Boom, and record it. And what's great about it, if you have a team using it, you can actually, as a manager, you can see what your team is